Hey y'all, and welcome back to this episode of Tea with Taylor. I think we're at a tipping point to hopefully swing the tipping point back to our fundamental principles is to take responsibility upon ourselves on these ideas that are pushed forward, to figure out what we believe, to educate ourselves, to read books, to listen to opposing ideas, to accept conversation and debate with those that we may disagree, and to just really try and think about what we believe, not just believe what we are told. And it is remarkable to me that we have so many examples, like I just discussed, of history, yet we don't learn from it. And we tend to never learn the lessons of history. You know that saying where they say history repeats itself? I like the other saying a little bit better, where it says history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, because the same ideologies and tactics are used to manipulate people, but they could be done in a different way through different forums or different technologies as we progress as a society. And for some reason, today we reject biology and we object eternal truths. But the truth is that these tyrannical tendencies are a part of human nature. It is seated within each and every one of us. That shit is ancient. But yet we want to act like it can never be us. Everything that I just spoke about in these ideologies and the human atrocities of the past were done by humans. The people in government are humans. Let's stop acting like we're so much smarter than our founders. We're so much smarter than the generations and the societies before us, because we have MacBooks and we have iPhones and we have the internet and we have email. Just because you have access to knowledge doesn't mean you have wisdom, or doesn't mean that you are educated. And I would just say that denial of that this tendency, this tyrannical tendency, is in each and every one of us, and it's in that meaning, it's in our government. We do that at our own peril. And the lacking the perspective that there are literal dictators today in the world in 2021, while also lacking the self-awareness that many of you support these tactics used in these ideologies. And I'm going to list some of the ones that I thought about that I see many of you support, even though you virtue signal as if this is for the betterment, but you do see society as more of a collective than an individual. And many of you support the giving of government. You support giving the government more control and expanding the scope of their power. You support government confiscation and distribution of people's wealth. You support the consolidation of public and private enterprise. You support the censorship of ideas that you don't like. You support the idea that there's such thing as hate speech. Who determines hate speech? That's a slippery slope, and the slippery slope is a real thing. You support canceling those you disagree with and outcasting them from civil society. You support calling them Nazis, racist, Uncle Tom, sexist, homophobic if they don't think the way you want them to. You support the destruction of buildings and cities if it justifies your end goal, and then you say they're peaceful protest. You support the policies and institutions that want to destroy the nuclear family. You support the corrosion of social norms. You support the demonization of capitalism, the fairest economic system that resulted in lifting billions of people out of poverty. You support the implementation of racism through affirmative actions, quotas, and what is being taught today as critical race theory. You support the government being able to forcibly shut down businesses and dictate who people and citizens can or cannot see, even if that's their own family. You support government-mandated medication and open to the idea of medical identification in order to participate in society, otherwise known as show me your papers. You support the infringement of the right of the people to keep and bear arms. You support the unwarranted government surveillance of Americans who have not committed a crime, they just think differently. You support the censorship of the President of the United States, who 40 of your fellow Americans, or 70 million, over 70 million of your fellow Americans voted for, and you support his censorship. You support the idea that America is a systemically a racist country, that the only way to rid her of her sins is to tear down society from the inside out by all means necessary, even if those means are sinful themselves. And in order to implement in all the policies that we discuss and everything that we see around us, is that the government needs a crisis. They need their people to be in crisis to then look for the government to save them. They need crisis to be able to expand the scope of their power, whether that be times of war, poverty, inflation, starvation, disease, racial or political tensions, or even climate change. And that's because they need fear. Fear is a very strong emotion within humans that allows for others to manipulate them based off that fear. And in the United States, there's been many instances of this where policies have been portrayed or communicated as temporarily, but they never seem to go anywhere. We had the income tax that was in the Civil War to pay for the Civil War. We had the Federal Reserve, 1913, and then the income tax was ratified in 1913. We had the Patriot Act after 9/11 that many, and I would probably agree with, that violated our Fourth Amendment right. In the past year, we've forfeited our freedoms and liberties and pursuits of happiness for the government for a disease that has been exploited politically. The rules that are ever changing, most of them don't make sense, and if you question the science or their authority, you are considered about not caring if people die. Emotions over logic. Can't be logical, you can't think for yourself, only be emotional. And if you do think for yourself, well then, you're a bigot. And I don't know about you, but in a country where you can't question or ask questions about government authority, that's not a free country. So is America a free country today? I don't know, it seems to be less and less so. And for these policies, like I said, they were communicated or portrayed to the public as being temporarily, because they knew that was the only way that maybe the people would be on board. But as we know, if you give up your freedoms and your liberties to the government, you hardly or rarely ever, if ever, get those liberties and freedoms back. And the only way to remain a free society is by having an educated public, which is why it's so important that you take the time to try and learn some of these policies or these values or these ideologies that are being forced upon us and portrayed to us. Because an educated mind cannot be enslaved, and it's important that you think for yourself. And it's interesting. Human behavior and history, it's fascinating. And the only way for us to move forward is really to have trust in our people and in our citizens over the government. We should want more power in the hands of individuals and freedom in each other rather than the government. That does not mean everything will be perfect. We are humans. We're incapable of creating this perfect state of utopia because man is not perfectible. Freedom is difficult. It's messy. And it can be personally conflicting because at times you may want something or people to act one way, but in a free society, as long as they're not infringing on your freedoms and harming you or your property, you gotta let them live. Live and let live. And we have to understand that always, throughout all of human history, freedom has not been a thing for all of human history, for one. It is actually unique. And freedom is always under attack and at risk of being taken from the people by the powers that be. And let's not make it easy on them. So really understand the foundational principles to respect freedom and liberty, and to respect the freedom and liberty of people that you live with, your neighbors, even if they're not doing what you want them to do. To accept that and to question the government. Don't blindly follow the government, because bad things happen when people do that. And revolutions, the American Revolution is unique. So thank you for joining me with this episode of Tea with Taylor, and I'll talk to you guys soon. God bless.